Amanda Butt is the Brewmaster and Innovation Ambassador. She oversees the entire process to ensure Great Western continues to brew some of the world's greatest tasting beer right here in the prairies. Amanda's Canadian born. She's a newfie. Yep.
You're going to hear it.
Oh, good. She gained a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry, and she holds a Master of Science degree in Brewing and Distilling from the world-renowned, I'm going to butcher, Harriet Watt University in Edinburgh, Scotland. I think that's where you got to go if you're going to learn how to do beer.
There weren't many choices, but that was top of the list for sure.
Of course. Before joining us, Amanda led brewing research and development, helped launch over 20 new beers at Boston Beer Company, and prior to this role, she worked in Canada with Labatt Brewing Company. So, Amanda joins Great Western at an exciting time right now. She's here to create award-winning beer, maintain the international brewing reputation, and bring innovative things to the Great Western brewing process. So, with that being said, everybody put your hands together. Let's get shaken with Amanda. Oh, I'm so excited. I had so many questions. Some of them are really bad ones, like they're really corny about beer, but I'll ask those later. First one, I read in your bio, you were saying you have a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry. And so when you went into that path, did you have a plan that you were going to be a brewmaster all along, or how did this career path unfold?
I think I'm very jealous of anybody who gets into university and has a plan. So I started in a degree program that I was actually dating someone who was in the degree program, and it sounded like I could totally do this. And so I went in and I learned very quickly all the things that I didn't want to do. But didn't have a good sense of what you could do with the degree. And so during one of our summer semesters, a prof sat us down, it was a small class of about 6 of us, and started asking us, you guys are getting into 3rd year, what are you all going to do? And so someone says they're going into pharmacy, which is very wonderful. Someone else is going into pre-med, and that's honorable as well. And he stops us, he says, none of you are going into beer. Why not? And then it occurred to me, someone makes a living off making beer. It could be me. Yeah. And so that's kind of how that seed was planted. And I was able to get a volunteer term with Molson in St. John's, where I would get up, I'd spend a few hours at the brewery, I'd go to my job at the library, and then I'd go to class and kind of keep that going for months. And I said, if I can do this, I'll know very quickly if this is something I want to do or not. And I loved it.
Yeah. Now you said you get up, because back in the day, used to run a brew pub here in Saskatoon, and my brewmaster would come in very early when no one was around, and his day was done when we all started to come to work. Yeah. And he'd sit there and have a glass of beer at like whatever time it was. Like
it's a shifter.
Yeah. And he'd go, Shawna, come taste this. And I'm like, I just started my day. So what time does your day start in the morning?
It's very late for me now, which is very lovely. I don't start until about 7:45.
Oh, that's really,
awesome.
yeah. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. You have people to do that now. So we talked about being a female brewmaster. I mean, you are probably, when you go to your conferences, that you're probably a very small, elite, kind of distinguished group of ladies. And this is my impression. I could be totally wrong. But what are some of the challenges that you've encountered, you continue to encounter? How did you tap through that beer keg of the old boys club?
So I think it kind of depends on where I was working. And so there were certainly instances in my career where you look around the table and you're the only woman at it. And then there's other instances in my career where the entire leadership group was women. So it's been quite a dynamic. When you get to go to some of these conferences and meet some of the people who are brewing, you meet talent across gender and across race, across, all these backgrounds. And so when I went to school even, it wasn't a whole lot of women, but there were some, but people came from all over the world to learn about brewing and beer. And I think that's, evident in the industry when you go out in it. And yeah, maybe you don't see as many women now, but the original brewers were actually women way, way back. And I think you're seeing more of a resurgence. I guess some of the challenges as a woman and being in industry is there were times when you probably felt the the company was like, hey, you should go do a collaboration with another woman brewer and we'll showcase that we love women and we're super supportive. And I was like, that's kind of a BS reason to go brew with someone. But I've met some very talented brewers, and some of the women I most respect in brewing are, you know, kind of trailblazers and certainly making it a more visible industry to other people, male or female.
So when you said they used to be a lot more women in the field, is it because of the whole, it was looked as cooking kind of recipe-ish kind of, like, why would there be more women way back and then it went?
So, I mean, very early on, way before industrial and way before you would have breweries who shipped very far at all, it would all be brew pubs. And so women were traditionally the ones who ran it. And so, yeah, it's very recipe driven. It's very much like, well, I can't say very much like making bread, but there's some parallels. But it's that thing is, if you're making something, if you're making wine, if you're making beer, it was traditionally the women who did that.
Yeah. So Great Western Brewery, you're not a small craft type of brewery. You're not a big corporate one like Labatt's that you're. So it's sort of like this Goldilocks paradox here. You're kind of like in the middle, and a lot has changed in the brewery business in the last 5 or how many years. Has this impacted the growth of your company and development? What have you learned and what have you done to evolve with this approach?
So it's really interesting, isn't it, like the definition of craft beer, and I think it depends on who you ask what that means. And so you're right, we're not at a brewery that's the same size as like the guys across the street at 9 Mile, who are awesome, and they're friends, but we're also smaller than the smallest brewery Labatt owns, which is 10 times smaller than its next smallest brewery, which is a lot of walking around to say that we don't sell a whole lot of beer comparatively to the multinationals. But you're right, we're certainly of a much bigger scale than the guys across the street. So what we pride ourselves on is using local ingredients and making very well-made beer, and we keep very tight quality control of what we do. And so we're at a size enough where we can afford to do that. And that's something I'm very proud of. It's an interesting area because you get caught up in, it's like, are you craft beer or are you not? Are you one of the big guys? Are you not? It's like, we're kind of in the middle, and it's a really sweet spot, and we're very comfy here. We have experienced some growth. This year's been challenging with some trade barriers in Alberta, but we've seen some of our really more premium beers kind of start to take off, and so that's part of why I'm here as well, is, you know, how do we help develop into broader beer categories. And so we've got some pale ale, we've got copper, and we're dabbling in Radler now, but it's like, okay, what else is out there for us? So that's been.
So is that what we're going to look for? Because I know last October you had an October beer, I think, or something.
There was a Bach, I believe.
Yeah, and then now this Radler, which is fabulous, summer. So are you
Which
going to
there's some out back.
Yes, there's Radler tasters in the back. Is that going to be a product year round now, or is it just very seasonal?
No, I think Radler itself, is the style lends itself to something a bit more seasonal. I think it's still available year round right now. I don't know if that'll continue or not. We're going to kind of wait and see on that, because this is year 2 for us. This is the first full year we've had it, which is exciting to see its growth. But I think there's other styles that we're looking to get into that might be pretty fun. So look out for that.
I know. Like, I was waiting for pumpkin beer for Thanksgiving, and my husband, who's not a drinker at all, but he loves like cranberry kind of sweet beers. So Christmas is coming. You might want to look at that.
Noted.
I'll help taste. So, have you traveled? I mean, obviously you were in Scotland, and that's where you got your education. But have you traveled to other countries to experience the beer culture there? And what was your impression? And what did you bring back? And what have you learned? What are you applying?
Sure. I've poured in beer festivals on 2 continents in 3 countries, and so that has been really cool. Drinking beer for culture in America versus somewhere like Scotland or even somewhere like Belgium is very different. And so I would say like the 2 ends of the extreme for me might actually be Belgium and Canada. So in Belgium, when we were there a couple years ago for a conference, and basically it was a week of let's go drink all the different beers that we can. It was amazing. So you get there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and a bartender, I'm not joking, this is a working conference, guys. So we get there, and if you've ordered a beer and the glassware is unavailable, they won't they won't serve you the beer because they won't serve it in a
Silo cup.
inappropriate glass. There's reverence for beer that we have a very different reverence for beer, but they have a very different appreciation for beer, and I don't think that wine trumps beer necessarily at the table in Belgium. Like, you've got a beer glass rather than a wine glass, and you've just got such a broad spectrum of what beer is, and you've actually got a religion built around beer. So the Trappist beers, the monks in the monasteries, like you've got this whole other subset of beers that don't exist here. But here we've got this really interesting roots in lagering and stuff that's not really done in Belgium. So we've got very different dynamics, and so kind of bringing aspects of the two into the forefront would be very cool.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going off script here a little
No, you're
bit
fine.
too. So I know that back when I was a teenager, I mean, my dad drank Pilsner, Bow, or whatever that was, and so as you're a teenager trying out beer was Labatt's Light because it's light, right? And so I swore by Labatt's Light, and then when I started to run this place that was a brew pub, the brewmaster, again at 9 o'clock in the morning when I'd come in, was like, try this. So I started to try these beers. And he changed my palate. It's sort of like wine.
Yeah.
Start with Merlot, work your way up, yada, yada. And so here I am drinking Pilsner, and then he starts to introduce some, like some ales, some like, not the dark, well, I'll do Guinness now too. And so I got to evolve my palate. And as a female, like I was like, no, I'm Labatt's Light drinker. And then thankfully, he introduced me to this
saved
world.
you. Yeah.
He saved me.
you.
He
Yeah.
did. Because now whenever I go to a city for a conference, I'll ask about what their local beer is and give it a try. How do we, what is your approach? What do you think? Because I think there's a lot of females that are like that out there. How do we get more females drinking beer and experimenting with beer?
The tide is turning. And so I think, as with wine, like wine's become so much more approachable than it was. And I think beer is very much coming on the scene at that. And you see people with brew pubs, and you can mix food and beer, and the more you get people comfy with, hey, I can try a flight, or I can try a sample, or just go out and do something different, or I've incorporated this different ingredient, or you've tried this different hop, or I've read about this style, and I think it's emerging. And so I would encourage, like, we've got some fantastic breweries in Saskatoon, and people are more than happy to just, give you a 2-ouncer to say, do you even want to finish this? And so if you can do that and try a couple, I mean, you're still very safe doing that, and you can get a pretty broad range of styles here. So we've got some people who dabble all over the place. We've got some people who focus in on styles and kind of play within that, and so you've got a really good range here of breweries that we can experiment with.
So you're with Great Western. How long have you been in with Great Western Brewing Company now?
Just since February.
Since February.
Yeah.
So you filled some shoes or filling some shoes, and
Yep.
you're looking at, applying your own special touches. What's your vision? What do you want to share with us, and where you'd like to see this company that you're now kind of cooking the recipes? And
Well, yeah, we're at an interesting point at Great Western where we've got like the 016. It's been around for a few years. We've got copper and prairie wheat that goes with that. What else can come to that line?
can you
Or
mess with that recipe?
Can I mess? What do you mean mess?
Well, like, okay, so you got the original 16 recipe, and you've got these.
Right.
So when you look at it, and you're like, oh no, I want to.
But it's mine now, Shawna.
Yeah. So the person like it is the company owns it, so you can mess with it.
I mean mess, tweak,
There we go. Yeah.
modify slightly.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Don't ruin. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And so, I mean, when you hear Great Western Company of beers, we see them sponsoring a lot of events and venues, and I mean, it's made a name for itself in the prairies. So it's doing quite well here in Saskatchewan,
well,
and you
yeah.
said we're expanding into Alberta and
Yeah.
whatnot. So where's the expansion sort of focus? Where are you?
So I think it's twofold. I think it's, how do you bring the awesome story that is Great Western and the beer that goes with to other people in Canada, because I think that's a worthwhile avenue. And then also, how do you build upon what's already there and have some new news about, what else can we do? Like, I'm certain they didn't hire me to do just the same. And so with my background, being able to dabble and play a little, and I've worked on a number of different styles, and I would love to incorporate some of them here, and I think there's a really good fit for it, and I think the market's right for it. So it's a bit of arm wrestling with marketing, but we'll figure it out.
Oh, I'm in
So
marketing.
But that's it. That's what you do, and you come to consensus, and then
Just get them
yeah,
drunk
I
and say,
feel
sign
like-
here.
Do you know what? A lot of business decisions probably get made that way. But when you have 8 a.m. tastings, like that's how you
Yeah.
make decisions. So, no, I'm excited. I don't feel at all held back. I feel very supported. And I think the team is kind of pumped to be like, all right, what are we going to do next year? So I think there's a few things planned for next year. We're kind of in the works. We're like, I'm on the last tweaks of something new for hopefully Q1.
Yay.
And then, yeah, we'll see.
Awesome. Well, that's exciting. My last question to you, I always end it this way, and then we're going to open it up for some questions to the group over here. Who has been an inspiration to you, whether it's personal, professional, or even both?
I would say Jim Cook, who I got to work for in Boston. So growing up in Newfoundland, there were your 2 big breweries and a couple smaller breweries as well. And I think the first time I tried what I'm going to call better beer was Boston Lager. And I said, holy crap, this is someone's flagship beer. It's red, it's hoppy, it's very well balanced, but it is not like your run-of-the-mill like Molson or Labatt. Mm-hmm. And I said, that takes guts to run with that. And so as someone who helped kick off the craft beer revolution in America 30 years ago, like it was incredible to get to work for him, but also work with him. So, you know, we had interaction, but it was very inspiring to meet him and to kind of see kind of what he's up against. And he really took on a lot of big beer and has really brought the company to where it was. It was fantastic.
Is he still?
He's still
Yeah.
there. He's
Yeah.
founder of the company. He's still very involved. Jim Cook tastes every single run of beer that comes off the line in all 3 of those breweries, and he approves every single beer before it goes to market. Like, he is invested in the company, and that's admirable.
I want that job.
Right?
Yeah. Taste testing.
Yeah.
All right. With that being said, we're ready to take some questions from the audience. Anyone have a question for Amanda?
Yes, you can. I will try.
Yeah.
No, and that was really wonderful about being in Scotland is you had CAMRA, so Campaign for Real Ale, and they're an organization that promotes the traditional cask ale, and so some of the beers you've mentioned as well are also nitrogenated, so it does have a creamier taste. It's not as sharp as the carbon dioxide that we're accustomed to in beer, but it's really it's a different process, but it's kind of wonderful. It's like you finish a beer, you add a little more sugar, you add some yeast, and you let it do its thing. And you just let it sit in a cask, and then you pour it from a gooseneck, and it's just got this beautiful body or cascade to it. And you're right, it's very much more for the appearance, the show of it, as well as the enjoyment. So I too miss that.
So this place where I was in charge of this brew pub, we had every month where it was free. You would come in for the cask beer. I didn't have any clue what we were doing, but it filled the place. And so people would come, and it was right, like whatever you want to, I don't know if it's tapping it, but right on
Yep.
the bar, and you would just hand it out, and it would just go, and it would just pack the place. And it was a different one every month that we did. Yeah.
Right now, copper. I'm digging copper. Like, I'm a sucker for Vienna Lager, and this is as close as I get, and I get to not mess but tweak with the recipe, which I have some out back as well, so that's why I brought it. It's good for fall. It's not terribly bitter. It's got a bit more sweet tone to it, but it's got a richness to it that I really like. I would say, I'm going to echo a little bit of what I said before is we've got some great local spots here. Are you in town here? Yeah. Definitely head down to any of the pubs or the brew houses and ask for a flight. And you'll get a pretty good range
Cathedral has, it's
Cathedral
crazy.
has a good one. Yeah, they'll do a good one too.
They do a lot
I like
of
to
little
go, like,
flights.
the guys at 9 Mile are awesome. And
Yeah.
anytime I've gone in to be like, hey, can I just taste a few? They'll bring me out several samples, and then I'll grab a pint of of what have you. But if you want to do a bit of reading ahead of time, if you want to try, you want to go for a night of hoppy beer, you want to go for an evening of sour beer, like there's people making it in town, and I would say absolutely, like they don't mind pouring out a little bit, especially if it means, you know, you're willing to try it and come back, and maybe you'll take a growler home. It's, yeah. Okay, no, good question. I think when I started volunteering at Molson, a young woman named Brandy was the assistant brewmaster there, and she was like a friend of a friend, and so she let me kind of volunteer and kick around the brewery for $0. And she was kind of like my first introduction, and she was one of, I think, 2 or 3 women in the brewery, and so that was, you know, apparent. When I got up through school, there were probably 2 or 3 more women, so you know, you're starting to see a bit of a trend. And then as recently as last year, the Director of Innovation and Research woman, Director of Brewery Programs woman, the Manager of Research and Development woman, the Manager of Brewery Operations woman, and there's myself, who was the Brewing Manager of Ops for R&D. So I started to see more women, certainly, and our sensory technologists as well as women. So, and here there are, you know, women at the brewery who are in senior positions as well. So I've seen more of a trend of more women, particularly within STEM. But I would be lying if I said it were equal.
That's kind of a sour note to end on.
No, I mean,
You talked about sour beer. Sorry, I'm going because you said like I get the hoppy beer, but what's sour beer? Like, what would you give an example? Of
sour beer is like more traditionally European. Some are barrel aged, some are not. Some of the really good entry-level sour beers are like a Berliner Weiss or a Goza. And so I know the guys across the street are doing a Goza, and it's basically a kettle sour. So you let a lactobacillus culture kind of take over for a bit, and it drops the pH. So it drinks more like a white wine.
Oh.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, one more last, anyone? Because this is where I like to go into my fun round. For some of you who have never experienced this is where I get really crazy and ask some really crazy questions. And it's a fun speed round. It's the 7 revelations with Amanda. And the first question is, what is the weirdest ingredient you have placed in beer?
Oysters. Oysters, for sure. We did an oyster stout. So we had this big hop back, it's like a big strainer, and we would run off of our kettle, so quite hot, it's boiled wort, a stout, a heavy stout. And so the salt from the shells and the oysters would cook. It was actually really good. Don't shake your head. Don't knock it to me.
No, I'm just thinking about the men. I'm just thinking about the men and oyster combination. Poor women that night.
So yeah, we'd haul out the strainer afterwards and shuck all the oysters, and you'd have a feed at lunchtime, because you know, and then we'd ferment everything out. And
I love
later.
oysters.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's
interesting. Okay, so if you were the queen of the beer universe, what would you change to improve the beer culture in your universe?
I think I would want to see more table beer. Like, I would want to see more beer as a staple thing with food at mealtime. Like, it not necessarily wine is the go-to, but thinking about different styles of beer. So I think that would be maybe not take over from wine, but push it a little further.
What's one of your pet peeves?
I dislike when people say, I don't like dark beer because it's too heavy. It's a ridiculous statement. Guys, dark beer isn't really that heavy. You should try it. There's some out back.
It's healthier. Like
Can
Guinness?
be healthier, except we're not allowed on this continent to promote health benefits of alcoholic beverages. So I can't say that, but there's more stuff in it.
Yeah.
So and most dark beers are actually quite light, particularly in alcohol and body. So give it a try.
See, this is where, because the dark beer, my grandpa, my Guido, he would make stout, and he'd bring it at Christmas time, and it was really thick and sludgy, and so you'd go, okay. So when we saw Guinness, I'd be like, no. And then when I first had my first Guinness, I was like, I like this. This is like having a chocolate milkshake.
Guinness can be awesome, especially as you get closer to Dublin. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that would be, a bucket list thing. Favorite beer and food pairing? You talk about beer and supper. What would it be?
I love IPA and nachos. Like, it's not fancy, but it's delicious.
There we
Right?
go.
Come on over, guys. We're gonna brew some IPA in a few weeks, and then we'll have some nachos. It'll be
Okay.
fantastic.
So tell me, you open the fridge, there's no beer, there's no 016 or copper that you're into. What is your next go-to drink then that
Do
we
you know,
might catch you drinking?
I had last weekend. I had some mulled wine, and it's like, oh, I love mulled wine. It's the season for mulled wine.
Yeah. Oh.
That I would love that.
Okay. What's your go-to song when you're drinking beer?
Won't Back Down. I've been listening to Tom Petty lately, like
Yeah,
everybody, and like
yeah.
my 3-year-old sings "Won't Back Down," and it's like the sweetest little thing. Like she has the tiniest little voice, and she's like, "Stand me up at the gates of hell, and I won't back down." And it's like, this warms my heart, girl. It warms my heart. So, yeah.
And last one, if you could sit and have a beer with anyone, who would it be and why?
I think I would love to sit down and have a beer with my pop who passed 20 years ago, because he would think this is the coolest thing on the planet, and I think that would be awesome. It'd been cool to share this with him.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he's sharing it with you and sees what you're doing and how successful you are. So,
Cheers.
with that being said, everyone, let's give a round of applause to Amanda.